Just, if I may address one issue.
Manager of
you just denigrated Bongino's law enforcement credentials. He was a cop and a Secret Service agent. You denigrated his academic credentials. He has a master's degree.
Because he was a police officer doesn't make him qualified to run a 38,000-person, $11 billion budget agency, just like Pete Hegseth.
But you know what does? Because he
National Guardsman or everyone doesn't either. Thank you for your service.
The confidence and the pleasure of the president. And I'm sorry that
terrible.
And I'm sorry that you are not yet over the outcome of the election.
No, because look at what's happening to our country. And I'll never be over it, Scott. This is dismantling our democracy in front of our eyes, and you guys are okay with it.
Tara Setmeyer. A masterclass in smug decibels and selective outrage. Tara Setmeyer is what happens when cable news decides that every panel needs exactly one person who can deliver talking points with the fire of a revival preacher and the subtlety of a wrecking ball. She's the Cannes equivalent of a hurricane watch, loud, dramatic, and often based on questionable forecasts. To her credit, Tara speaks with the unwavering confidence of someone who's been personally appointed as the moral compass of America. She can denounce a conservative in under 30 seconds, cite January 6th 6 times before breakfast, and still find time to remind you that she's a principled conservative, which is cable news code for Republican who always votes like a Democrat but feels sad about it. In the Jennings Bongino debacle, Tara took one look at Bongino's credentials, law enforcement background, Secret Service detail, master's degree, and essentially responded, cute, but not woke enough for federal leadership. She waved off his resume like it was a CV's receipt and not 20 years of public service, all while basking in the warm glow of her own moral superiority like it was a tanning bed. Scott Jennings, bless his heart, tried to jump in like the last sane man at a dinner party full of doomsday cultists. He pointed out, quite reasonably, that Bongino might actually be qualified, only to be hit with a rhetorical fire hose of disdain from Tara that suggested he, too, might be guilty of thinking credentials matter more than narrative. She's the type of pundit who could accuse a fireman of being a fascist because he used too much water. If Bongino walked on water, Tara would say it's because he can't swim. No matter the issue, if you're a Republican who hasn't publicly renounced Trump, confessed on Mississippi, and performed a ritual of progressive penance, Tara's not having it. But don't worry, Tara's brand of televised righteousness is perfectly calibrated for the Cannes crowd, dramatic enough to stir Twitter, sanctimonious enough to trend, and just self-aware enough to throw in a "but I used to be a Republican" disclaimer right before launching into a monologue that sounds like it was written by Joy Reid's social media manager. In conclusion, Tara Setmeyer is less of a political commentator and more of a political vibe check. She doesn't analyze so much as admonish, and her specialty is making sure no conservative gets too comfortable, especially if they're, heaven forbid, actually qualified.
Does Dan Bongino have the qualifications to be the second person in charge of the FBI?
Yes, he has law enforcement, he has academic, and again, let me just stress this. I've mentioned this before.
So when you stack up his credentials,
they serve at the pleasure of the president. That's the political appointment.
I know that is the answer to every question, is that Donald Trump wants it, so therefore it is good.
For political appointments, yes.
But when we look at, we're talking about people who are qualified and not, and you look at his resume and compare it to Republican and Democrat nominees for that same position, is he qualified?
First of all, I'm not sure all the people that have been appointed in the past have covered themselves in glory. And some of them have done a terrible job and gotten in lots of trouble.
Look,
and this is a reform-minded administration. They got outsiders.
Scott Jennings valiantly rode into battle on Cannes, sword of reason in one hand and a laminated copy of Dan Bongino's resume in the other. Faced with the shocking revelation that Bongino once had the audacity to be both conservative and credentialed, Jennings reminded the panel that Dan wasn't just some guy with a podcast and a grudge. He was a former Secret Service agent with a master's degree in psychology. The kind of degree that should automatically make you immune to being called a right-wing nutjob, but alas, Cannes studio rules apparently say otherwise. Jennings wasn't merely defending Bongino, he was waging war against the sacred media tradition of scoffing at any conservative who's managed to open a book and carry a badge. According to Jennings, Bongino's mix of field experience and crowd-pleasing MAGA energy makes him a prime candidate for a high-ranking FBI post. Because, let's be honest, it's not like recent FBI appointees have been flawless beacons of neutrality either. But sure, let's keep pretending that qualifications only grow on the blue side of the aisle. Does Dan Bongino have the qualifications to be the second in command at the FBI? Well, let's see. He was a cop, a Secret Service agent, has a master's degree, and knows how to form complete sentences without a teleprompter. So naturally, the answer is, how dare you even ask that? Of course! He's qualified! Enter Scott Jennings, Khan's token voice of reason in a sea of performative pearl, clutching who dared to point out that Bongino's resume wasn't scribbled in crayon. Jennings practically had to throw himself across the table like a human shield for common sense, listing Bongino's credentials, while the rest of the panel stared at him like he'd just defended pineapple on pizzas. Yes, Bongino has actual law enforcement experience. Yeah, he has academic chops. But most importantly, and I really must emphasize this like it's a passage from scripture, he has the pleasure of the president. That's right, it's a political appointment. Boom. That's the magic phrase that makes liberals clutch their pearls and journalists drop their monocles into their soy lattes. Jennings, of course, reminded everyone that political appointment isn't a slur. It's literally how the job works. Now, if we're going to pretend this is about qualifications, as if that's ever mattered in D.C., let's go ahead and stack Bongino's resume up against previous Republican and Democrat appointees. Spoiler alert. Not everyone in the FBI's leadership tree has exactly been a glowing pillar of moral clarity. Some have tripped over their own scandals, others couldn't manage a bake sale, let alone a federal agency. So is Bongino qualified, compared to the rogues gallery that's come before him? Honestly, he might be too qualified. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the real problem.
Listen, 85% of federal workers work outside of Washington, D.C. Those are people who work at our national parks. Those are people who work on, the ag departments in farm bureau states. Those are people who are taking care of Medicaid and processing payments for people in red states like where Donald Trump lives. So we need to stop being so cavalier, Scott, about people and whether they're working or not and how come they're so upset about getting an email. Because these are people's livelihoods.
Because some are being cavalier. You have the privilege of sitting here getting a six-figure paycheck from CNN.
And
I have to show up every day. And I have to show up and earn it. And I have to show up and earn it.
As public servants, and they do the same.
And I have to show up.
And the fact that you assume that they don't is obnoxious and insulting to those people.
They're not showing up and earning it?
They're good servants.
Hold on.
Why are you assuming?
Tara Setmeyer is not just a pundit. She's a one-woman off-Broadway production of Moral Panic, the musical. Whether she's chastising conservatives or performing emotional monologues about the soul of the nation, Tara delivers each segment with the intensity of someone trying to win an Emmy and an exorcism at the same time. In her latest performance, she graced Khan with what can only be described as a masterclass in dramatic pearl clutching, facing off against poor Scott Jennings, who just wanted to say words without getting emotionally audited. Tara went full final scene of Les Miserables, lamenting the fate of American livelihoods like she personally rescued orphans from the wreckage of democracy. She accused Jennings, on air, of lounging in con luxury, sipping cucumber water and collecting six-figure checks like it's some sort of spa for centrists. Meanwhile, Jennings looked like he was trying to remember if he left the stove on, or if this was just what Tuesdays are now. Tara's signature style is a potent blend of moral superiority, selective empathy, and theatrical outrage, with just a dash of I'm a principled conservative, unlike those other savages. She's the type of pundit who can cry for working-class Americans while signing a book deal about how much she cries for working-class Americans. And let's be honest, her sand contract likely comes with a makeup team, a lighting rig, and a therapist on standby for when someone brings up 2016. Setmeyer has mastered the art of playing the reasonable Republican who agrees with Democrats on literally everything, but insists it's because she has principles, not because it gets her invited to all the right brunches. Her idea of balance is scolding conservatives for being conservative while reminding liberals that she's totally not one of them. She just votes with them, speaks like them, argues like them, and cashes checks from the same network. In short, Tara Setmeyer isn't a commentator. She's cable news dinner theater. Tune in for the politics, stay for the soliloquies. Anyway, let me know what you think. Like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. It helps us, it helps the mission, and it helps bring honest conversation to the table.